It's so nice to be back on the air. It's been some time, which, is the beginning of every episode now. I think it's been like 2 months. Good news, Sweet Pete is doing a lot better. I think the last episode was actually the day that Sweet Pete had his surgery on his neck. He had a tumor removed. It ended up being non-cancerous, but at the time we had to take him into the emergency vet. We were unaware of whether the growth had got cancer or not. Luckily enough, it was what's called a basal cell tumor, and it was removed. He got a facelift. All his loose skin on his neck got pulled all tight because they cut so much skin off the back of his neck. And he is doing good. He's actually snoring right behind me. So thanks for all the well wishes with him. I did get stuck with a $6,000 vet bill, which is brutal. So I am going to, I think probably this weekend or over the next week, I'm going to make a Sweet Pete shirt and do some pre-sale and see if we can't make some money to help pay off that debt. But otherwise, Lex is not here today, but he did help me get everything set back up to be able to record with Mr. Dalek, who is our guest today, Mr. James Marshall. He is an old friend. I met him back in the 90s through Shepherd Ferry. It was funny. His stickers, I was seeing his stickers around town actually before I got the chance to meet him. And all the stickers were like a foot higher than everybody else's stickers. I was like, what in the fuck is going on with this guy? How is he able to get these things up so high? And it turns out he's just a foot taller than everybody that exists. So we'll talk to him in a minute. I'm very excited to announce a new sponsor on the show. SohoDesignHouse.com is a company originally out of New York, and they're here in Southern California now. They're in LA. They are making really rad art-based rugs, all handmade. They've had a number of artists who are doing really cool work. Megs, who was on the podcast a few episodes ago, he did one. So basically, they take a piece of artwork that's made by a contemporary artist, take and transform it into a really high-end, like I said, handmade, high-quality rug that, it could be hung as like a wall tapestry. You could put it on the floor and, display it as a rug that also has a really cool design. They've had Ron English, Pixel Poncho, Phil Frost did one. I posted actually on my Instagram the Dan Quintana one. I think that's how you say his name. Actually, I'd like to get him on the podcast sometime soon. His is really cool, skulls and girls and things. And it's amazing. We had Aaron M. Riley on the show, who is a weaver, and I'm reminded of her work sort of in this aspect. But these guys are the only ones who are doing it, in this sort of avenue. So hopefully it'd be rad to make a Live Free podcast one, or even, I'd like to or like my Biggie piece that I did would turn out as a really cool rug. Get a big Cooge rug. So go check them out. SohoDesignHouse.com. You can check them out on Instagram it's at SOHODH, and it's Soho Design House. If you're in LA, they're over at 6912 Melrose Avenue. You can go check them out and see what they have in their showroom. I'm excited to have them on board, and I appreciate the support. The show is a lot easier to do when there is a little money behind it. So if any of you, and I want to thank everybody who sent in messages while the show hasn't been going, people who have donated, $10, $20 here and there, $50. Super rad. It helps me, push to continue to do the show. Meanwhile, while I'm trying to support an art career, pay off a $6,000 dog vet. And so the fact that people want to sponsor the show is really rad. So if you're like a gallery or somebody involved in an industry that is similar to what we're talking about here on the show, and you want to support the show with some sponsorship, feel free to get in touch. You can email me at info@mikemaxwellart.com. So yeah, thanks to Soho Design House. They're sponsoring this show, and make sure you go follow them on Instagram and check out all their social medias and stuff. And you can check out all their stuff on their website, sohodesignhouse.com. So thanks, guys. Again, Mr. Dalek is on the show today. Really early inspiration. Super talented guy. His figures in the late 90s sort of transformed how I looked at graffiti to a certain extent. Him amongst a number of other people who have also been on the show, in fact. So I guess let's just jump right into this thing. Make sure you follow the Live Free Podcast at Live Free Podcast. You can follow me at Mike Maxwell Art. Follow Producer Lex at Producer Lex. And again, follow Soho Design House, SOHODH. All right. Welcome back, guys. It's good to be back on the mic. Let's just jump right into this thing and give Dalek a call. Mr. James Marshall, what's up, my friend?
What's up, Mr. Maxwell? Long time, man.
I know. It has been a long time since we've, seen each other in real life. I feel like the last time was at one of the Mary Kronowski shows, maybe.
Right. Yeah, that might be one of the last times I was even in L.A.
Yeah. I was thinking back to like when I met you, probably like early 2000s, maybe.
Right.
And the first thing that intrigued me, I guess you were in town in San Diego, and I realized that your stickers were about a foot higher than everybody else's. And I was like, what in the fuck is going on? Like, does this guy carry a ladder around with him? So something stood out right away. That was back in San Diego, but you grew up on the East Coast?
Mostly East Coast, yeah. I mean, I went high school in Japan, and I lived in Hawaii for a bit.
You're a military family, right?
Yeah, Navy brat.
Yeah.
So
how was that experience? I know for a lot of kids, like, even just, I remember I had to change elementary schools within like the city of San Diego, but it was a different school, and I remember that even being like a panic. I imagine it's pretty tough on kids going from like state to state, country to country.
Right. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, I don't think we enjoyed it, but it's the lifestyle, You don't know, what I'm saying? We didn't know anything different.
Yeah, there's no other frame of reference, really.
Right. I mean, but yeah, it sucked to kind of pull up roots every 18 months, 2 years, just as you were settling into a place, to have to yank up and go somewhere else. Especially, you got to remember, man, that was cell phone computer age.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to keep up with someone, you had to write letters, and no 13-year-olds writing letters more than once or twice before they're over it.
Yeah. It seems so unimaginable now, like what the experience is in comparison to like what we had in terms of not having everything broadcast, everything be like right in your face.
Right.
Funny even we're doing this, but did it affect your creativity? Did any of those moments stand out in particular that sort of shaped like an art path?
No, man, I always drew. Like, I just, how it is, just one of those things from the time I was a kid. I was always copying stuff out of comic books and making up little characters and doodling shit. Yeah, I don't know if anything really started shaping it until I moved to Japan. And I think that was probably partly age, too, because I was 16 when we moved there. And then having that kind of access to, the animation and that whole culture of art that the Japanese have.
Yeah, a much different type of popular culture.
Yeah, and that was always my frame of reference for art. Like, punk records and skateboard decks were really what got me more into art. And before that, it was comic books. So going to Japan, where so much of the art was kind of pop culture based and in your face everywhere you went, from toys to magazines to every shop had, animated characters in the windows. So, I think that's probably the first time I probably started paying attention to color,
Yeah.
And really trying to draw more, for the purpose of actually believing in, hey, I could do something with this. Even though that was, at that point, I still had no desire to be an artist.
Yeah, right.
I think it was just something that was interesting to do. I was drawn to it. But, that's that era where nobody's parents want their kids to, be an artist, man. It's like, it's a nice hobby, but leave it at that.
But at the same time, though, you still saw this opportunity in the culture at that age where there was something that you saw where you actually could make a living at it.
No, I mean, for me at that point, it was strictly it was still just a passion, It just, I think when I saw that stuff, it just inspired me to want to draw more, It never was really, I remember when I moved to Hawaii, like I ended up doing a T-shirt for like one of my buddy's bands, and I was like super pumped, And it was like a local band, and they only made like 2 dozen, but they hung them in their local record store. And I was just pumped, man. I mean, I didn't make a penny off that. We printed them in my boy's house, and but I think that went with that whole punk and skate ethos. It was just, you just did it for fun, and it was cool to do your own thing.
And there's something interesting, right? When you see something that you hand drew turn into something that's printed, that transformation seems very magical, I think. At least I find that experience.
Yeah, I mean, especially back then, man. I mean, I think we got like some home screen printing kit. It was like my buddy got it, and we like burned the screen in his bathroom, and like we're printing them on his back porch.
Yeah.
So it was super lo-fi, and it was just fun to do.
Do you remember what the graphic was?
Vaguely, man. I was so influenced by Pusshead. Like once I discovered his stuff, I just was kind of over the moon about it.
Yeah.
So I got super into that kind of pointillistic style. Just crazy skulls and zombies and that kind of shit, but all in that super crazy pointed out, black and gray.
Which is probably likely that everyone who was into heavy metal in the 80s probably followed a similar pathway in some way or another.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, man. I mean, that guy, again, because of the record covers and then, all the graphics he did for Zorlak, which is one of the big skate companies, at that point in the 80s, and that's all I wanted to ride was Zorlak boards. And like, but every time you saw a new Pusshead graphic, and I would always tell people, I was like, that dude used to put ads in Maximum Rock and Roll. It'd be like, send me $10 and whatever, and I'll draw something for you.
Wow.
But
that's
back
crazy.
Then I didn't have $10.
Yeah, what a disaster.
I'm so bummed.
Dude,
I remember seeing those ads in Maximum Rock and Roll and just being like, God, fuck, I wish I had $10 to send to this dude.
It's funny. That's sort of how I found Shepard, and I think that's how I met you, was sort of through him.
Yeah.
It was the same sort of deal. Like, send $10 and get, like a pack of stickers or whatever.
Right,
and
right.
just happen to be in the same neighborhood that I lived in and in the same environments or whatever.
Yeah.
So at what point, I guess when I started seeing your work, it's funny, you kind of bringing up the like pre-internet age. I made a post on Instagram recently about how Tower Records, like the magazine, even just Tower Records in general, was sort of like the internet of the time.
Yeah, man, that's a pretty good.
That's where I started getting all of like my graffiti information. Like all the different magazines all showed up there, like all the European magazines, all the stuff from back east that we just weren't getting in San Diego.
Right.
And I think your work and a lot of the stuff that you and your crew were doing in that time period, like late 90s, transition to like the 2000s, I think stood out amongst a lot of that stuff. So I found you then. When did you actually find graffiti? or when did you find the? I'm always interested in the transformation into the art form. Like I see. Oftentimes we see a lot of rebellion,
Right.
or a lot of personality types that are interested in taking control of their own sort of destiny. That sounds a little blown out of proportion, but like being able to take control of one's own life in some way.
Right. I think that's a common thread. It's funny, even in the mid 90s, late 90s, when the whole art scene was, and everybody, well, it's not graffiti writers, it's not skateboard artists, it's kind of these, but it's still a group that everybody associated together, especially a lot of those like move shows Rich Jacobs was doing. And I think that was the common ethos. It was people that came through any of those subcultures that were just kind of carving their own path. And for me, I think that skateboarding and punk is what led me to graffiti,
Yeah.
Because it was the same principles. It was like, I don't really want to go down this path. There's nothing interesting, but this path, I can really express myself the way I want to and kind of, do what I want with it, so, I mean, I knew about graffiti from the late 80s. I first started trying to paint it like early 90s when I moved to Chicago.
Were you quick to start adding the figurative work into your pieces?
The thing for me was, when I first started trying to paint graffiti, everybody told me you got to do letters, right?
Right.
And I remember I didn't want, like I tried, and I was like, I don't really dig this. Like, I'm not feeling it. And I always doodled characters. I told you, like, growing up, that's all I ever did. And then so I was like, well, fuck, man, I kind of want to spray paint characters. But there weren't a lot of dudes doing characters back then.
Yeah.
And I remember people telling me, like, well, you can't do characters because that's not graffiti. Graffiti's letters. And I was like, well, how the fuck are there rules to this shit already?
Yeah.
I was like, motherfuckers, you come out like hey, man, it's a free-for-all. And then you hit me with all these rules. And I was like, well, fuck it. I just want to paint the characters. And then the more I started developing ideas, that's kind of how the first Space Monkey concept, and then people were like, oh, yeah, this is good, man. You should just keep messing with this.
Yeah. And do you ever think, like, it's interesting now to look back, like 20 years, somewhere around that, to, later,
right.
And see the transition into what we see now in, like, this mass mural movement that's sort of been, snowballing over the last 5 to 10 years, like the movement into like the air quote street art movement, but it's now sort of turned into like something different from even what that thing was. Do you see that as like I mean from my point of view, I see you guys, like people like you and Scribe and a number of different people who sort of transitioned the graffiti movement, and I hated to even like start to like name things or whatever. But did you see that as a transitional point?
Well,
maybe not then, but like looking back now.
It's funny, man. Like I think even within everything, like I never really subscribed to the overall scene of it.
Yeah.
Like I hung out with, who I hung out with, and we kind of painted what we painted. And, it was always natural to evolve. I think everything has to evolve. Like, graffiti artists were complaining about street artists, like, skateboarders whined about BMXers, in the 80s, or someone's always got to bitch about something, and they always got to whine about who did what first and what's legit and what's not, and this, that, and the other fucking...
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like it takes like that decade of time, 10, 15 years, to be able to look at something and be able to get a general view of the history of something, right? Like for me, like for instance, I don't see like Dabs and Mila doing the MTV Music Award things, if
Right.
it wasn't for guys like you and like the other people mentioned, or like other people around that time, sort of making these marks. And I don't know if those, it's not obviously a direct correlation to anybody specific,
Right.
but
Well,
I definitely see those things as needing to have had happened to be where we're at now. Like to.
Well, no doubt. I mean, I think no different than what happened in the '80s influenced what happened. I mean, you always have feeder generations. The biggest game changer, as it is with anything, is social media, right? I mean, even in the early 2000s, you didn't have this hosting power, basically, right? Where now you paint something and everybody can see it, and I think it's so much easier to generate these movements now because it's so much easier to access stuff. I mean, I can go online and, we used to have to wait for a graffiti mag to come out.
Yeah.
But the magazine would be like 20 pages and it would be like maybe 50 different dudes. Now I can go on Instagram and I can look at, hundreds of different pieces of art within 10 minutes. And then I can take each one of those tangents anywhere I want to and keep discovering shit.
Yeah. That's the beauty, right? Like that spiral that you can get chucked into of information and knowledge, not in like a negative way.
Right. I mean, look, like anything, it can be a colossal waste of time and but at the same time, there's some good cherries to be picked, Yeah. And I think about that, whether it's my age or someone who's young coming up, like, the access kids have now. So if you're 13, 14 now and you can discover so much more shit. When we were 13, 14, man, you had to discover stuff by walking down the street.
Yeah.
And you only knew what was going on in your own backyard. And so now for people to have that ability to understand things globally, simply from their phone, it's cool, man. I think the mural movement, like anything, there's good and there's bad. There's stuff that I love and there's stuff that I hate, and but I found I've stumbled onto so much cool shit, and that it's served as an inspiration for me to just keep pushing what I'm doing. So I appreciate something that keeps me from being complacent,
Yeah.
I think complacency is the worst of all things, right? To sort of settle in and feel like I'm in a groove and I'm just going to ride it out. But to realize like I got to just keep pushing and taking it to next levels and new places. And
I think that's a good spot to, we spoke about the Space Monkeys for a minute. They took they sort of took a hiatus in your work. A number of years ago. I'm interested, is that the sort of thinking that went into that? Like, you've been working on a particular body of work for a set period of time, and was it a general lack of interest? Were you more interested in pushing yourself? And then I want to talk about the new work as well, too.
Yeah, I mean, the Space Monkey thing, for me, I pushed it as far as I could with the skill sets I had at the time. Mm-hmm. And once I sort of hit a place where I felt like I was just repeating myself, so I'd be prepping for a show and I'm like, all right, I want to make 8 paintings. And I started feeling like half of them looked the same. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And that's when, the decomposition started with that show at Jonathan's and then at Mary's, where the Space Monkey started getting covered up and the geometry started coming in, and it was just, it was just time. And I think for me, that's always it, man. I always just trust my instincts, on what feels right or doesn't feel right,
Uh-huh. And that's an interesting point too, because a big thing that comes up is, especially in the art world in general, and even just in business practice, you find something that works and then you stick to it if it benefits you,
right,
emotionally, financially,
Right.
psychologically, and it's interesting that you can. I feel like some people get stuck in the financial, which I mean is understandable, but to
Right.
follow your gut, sometimes it takes like you have to be brave. Sometimes you have to be willing to take those risks. Did you feel that way?
Well, for me, I always felt that if I didn't see something through, that if I didn't take it where I felt it needed to go, that was the empty point. You know what I'm saying? And I'd rather, if I was just continuing to crank out Space Monkeys just to get a paycheck, I'd probably want to shoot myself. Because to me, that's not what is interesting about life.
Yeah.
So for me, everything is about experience. Like the more experience I get, and all I'm doing in my paintings is trying to understand things better, right? So all the paintings I've made the last 5 years are really about understanding color, shape, space. They're just studies for me to understand how to do shit better. And so the more I can build my skill sets, the better I can understand how to execute the ideas I want to execute. And that for me is what it's about.
Have you ever taken the gradient color test? It's online. There's like a test that you have to line
Oh,
up.
yeah.
I imagine you would probably ace that.
Yeah, I forget what I got on it, man. I took it once. But that was probably even a couple of years ago, man. Like my gradient skills have gotten a lot tighter.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty significant challenge, especially I get you're wearing glasses, but I would assume you have to have some good eyesight to.
Yeah, I mean, I need reading glasses for this shit up close. I got one of those model lamps, with the big magnifying glass in it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times lining up points, you can't even be off like, a 32nd of an inch or it'll be all fucked up.
Yeah, and that's something like a signature of your work over time has been like the cleanliness of line. I feel like that's something that I was very, that I admired in the work itself. The cleanliness of line and making straight lines and having everything be clean. I'm sure that it's not as clean as it actually looks, or maybe it is. It's been a while since I've seen anything in person, but that's a task in and of itself.
Yeah, it is, man. I mean, it's clean in person. It's cleaner than it looks. Like most people, like my work never photographed well.
Yeah.
When people see it in person, they tend to be like, "Oh shit," because I don't think the depth comes through in the photographs. Because I don't photograph anything except with my phone.
Yeah, I'm the
and I
same
I don't light it. I don't, I hang it on a wall and take a quick photo of my phone and post it. So when people see it in person, I think they see more of the depth and the real slight color variations.
Yeah. And that's another problem too, is getting the colors to come out properly and not lose, like where one gradient would turn into two blocks of color, look like one block of color, etc.
Right, and keeping the shade, the hue consistent so that it's not getting a little warmer or cooler as you step it down either.
Yeah, that's like purples. Like if a purple goes too red, all of a sudden it changes the entire like smoothness of the transitions.
Right. So sometimes I'll mix colors, and then I'll have to yank certain things and go back and retool them a little bit.
Is that part of the fun for you, really just mixing the color?
Yeah, I could fucking do it all day, every day.
It's funny how that happens, right? Like some of the other stuff that isn't the art becomes like the fun, like joyful part for the maker.
Yeah, I mean, I could, I love mixing colors. My problem is I'll spend weeks doing it and then forget to paint. And I'm like, shit, I better start painting, man. I'm mixing all these colors.
Do you find that the more abstracted work now is a little bit more of the like working from your gut? Like, we were talking about instinct a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like now I'm trying to understand how to take flat two-dimensional color and start converting it into three-dimensional shape. And that's where the color complexity can get a little tighter. You know, you can step down. Like I used to think if I had like like 8 gradients of one color, I was good. And now I'm getting into like 20, 24, and next will be like 40, 50. But for me, now I'm starting to realize how I can shape things. And now I feel like I'm in the infancy of that. Like I'm just starting to figure out how to push and pull and manipulate things forwards and backwards and have things come out and recede.
Yeah,
And
and even
again,
like objects are starting to come out, a slight, like abstractions of objects.
right. And, part of it, there's twofold there. One is, I'm teaching myself, so I'll do something and I'll be like, oh, okay, I didn't quite get that shape the way I want to. So now I know I got to make this line a little fatter and make this one a little thinner and lift this up and push that back. But I've always liked the idea of, like, someone asked me, like, why I don't just do like fades, like why the hard line fades. And I'm like, because I don't want like to shade things. Like it's about two-dimensional color. The minute I start fading in just a regular fade, it's completely different than just taking individual colors and stacking them and creating the illusion of a fade. And I was like, if you can create three-dimensional things with just two-dimensional, like no shading, none of that weird fadey, just everything is a block color.
Yeah. And weird things happen when you implore that method, as opposed to like a worked blended or whatever. I like that it fools your eye to a certain extent.
Yeah, it does, because naturally you're going to have what looks like a highlight on one side and a shadow on the other, because where the color meets the lighter color on one side of it, it looks darker. And when it hits the other side where the darker color is next to it, it looks lighter. So even though they're individual strips of color, it'll look like it fades from light to dark or dark to light within each band.
Yeah.
So you naturally get these crazy stepped illusions, and I like that. I always like when people just look at the work and they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Because that's how I would go look at work when I went to museums or galleries. Like, it's just, how the fuck do they do that?
That's how you always know an artist is looking at a painting. So a casual observer will be like the 3 foot, like general distance back, maybe a little peek in. But artists always look at art from the side, like from the very side, and like try to see all the ridges and all the everything that's going on. I can always tell the artist in a room in a gallery. It's funny.
It is, man. But everything for me is about process.
Yeah.
Like people always ask, like the minute I make a painting, I could care less about it.
Yeah.
Like once it's done, like I'm happy to put it out in the world and for other people to see it, and obviously hopefully be able to sell it. But all I'm thinking the minute I finish a painting is like, what did I learn in that one that I can apply to the next one?
Do you look back?
What's that?
Do you look back at the old work?
Sometimes by default, meaning if someone sends me a picture of something or says, hey, what about this work? Or, and there's things I see that I left behind, but I don't try to replicate it,
Yeah, you can't.
I feel like, I was hitting on something there, but it was what it was. And it doesn't serve any purpose for me to try to go back and tangent off of that.
Do you get nostalgic though?
No, not at all, man. I feel grateful that the career has, been able to continue to grow,
Yeah.
I think I look at it that way. Like, I'm glad that I'm still capable of kind of pushing what I'm doing. And then I feel like that I haven't even really touched the surface, you know? I feel like I'm just starting to figure some shit out.
That's so beautiful to hear.
So we'll see where it takes me, man.
Nice. That's a perfect spot to end it. We got about a half hour. Can we send our listeners, where can they find your work online, on Instagram? And if you got
Instagram's the best place, man. I'm in the process of rebuilding the site and getting all that back up and running, but I've been posting everything I've been doing on Instagram, and my handle there is just at Dalek 2020.
Nice. All right, brother. I want to thank you again. I know it's getting late. I want to thank you again for taking the time to shoot the shit with me. It was a pleasure to talk with you again for a moment. Hopefully we'll see each other in real life before too long again.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I'm gonna try to get out west sometime in the fall. So if I do, I'll keep you posted for sure.
Is there anything coming up that we should be on the lookout for?
No, I'm doing a couple group shows through ThinkSpace. That's kind of because the painting's been taking so long. I've just been putting one here and there, and I've been working with Andrew and those guys. I've known him forever, and he always takes good care of me.
Cool.
And then ideally planning for a build-up to get back into some solo showing in 2016.
Beautiful.
So I want to do a few things before I'm ready for that, though.
Yeah. All right, man. Again, it was a pleasure. Let's do Internet Dap.
All right, brother.
Boom. All right. Thanks again. Have a good night, bud.
All right, Mike. Good talking, man.
Yeah, you too. I'll talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye.